thought it would be a really good idea to talk about a discipline in transformation. And when I talk about old as well, Mitzi was talking about the old PR and the new PR. It's actually all just PR, really. What's no different in terms of the level of professionalism and expertise and capability that you need to have. It wasn't so much that we were getting drunk with journalists in dark, smoky rooms in the 80s. It's just that it's evolved quite a lot. So in terms of who we are... Oh yeah, sorry. That's right. Glasses might help as well. So Ogilvy Public Relations Australia, we've got 120 people. As was mentioned earlier, we're the largest in the country. We have people in Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne and Adelaide. And we're based on 5 businesses. So we've got a business-to-business agency called Howarth. We've got a brand and consumer agency called Pulse. We've got a government relations agency called Parker & Partners. We've got a health practice called Ogilvy PR Health. And we have an internal change management company called Impact. And the beautiful thing about that particular model is that we're all specialists. So a lot of the other big agencies, you might have generalist sort of practitioners, but we're all specialists. So we've got people who used to be press secretaries for ministers, we've got ex-journalists, we've got people who have come from the online world, we've got people that are really good in corporate thought leadership. So we've got a really good specialist model. And through that we have 4 practice areas: social media, which is massive for us; social marketing, which is around behaviour change. We have an Ogilvy Earth sustainability practice, which looks at CSR and social environmental sustainability. And we also have a messaging and media training facility as well. So just some of the facts that I thought you might be interested in looking at. So we have a couple of things that might be interesting for you. We've got 200 clients, which is pretty massive, and I'll talk a bit about those in a minute. We're the number 1 agency, as I mentioned before. We have, the average age is about 30, which is a lot younger than me, but we have a real mixture of people. And actually it's really interesting looking around the audience today because there's a better balance of male and female than I normally see when I come and talk to some third years. So it's good to see that the gender balance is a little bit stronger, certainly on this campus. In terms of the company that we keep, this is a list of some of the clients that we have. Now, I don't know whether you know how most agencies work, but we work on either a project or a retainer basis with our clients. So, project basis, a client will come to us and say, we've got this particular problem, we need a short stint with you, can we work through with you? Maybe it's a 6-month project. Some of our other clients we've had, for example, Citrix and Microsoft, we've had for 10 years. So, when you get into agency, the most important thing is to keep clients and to work on them so that you understand them and they trust you and you get to do better and more diverse work. The interesting thing about the client list that we have is that we might do everything from, for example, government relations. We might be trying to help the government talk about a particular school bonus program that they need to communicate to disadvantaged families all over Australia. We might be helping Ford. It was interesting that Mitzi talked about Ford before. They're our client. We might be helping them with a factory closure in Victoria. So we need to talk to trade unionists. We need to talk to the internal stakeholders. We need to talk to their supply chain. We need to talk to their customers. So that's very, very different in terms of the comms that we do. From an internal perspective, there might be a new managing director. So there's a new change management piece that we have to help the leadership explain to the employees. For Pulse, which is our consumer agency, it might be talking about a new brand campaign that Tourism Australia is launching, or it might be about launching a new campaign for Fanta or Coca-Cola. You can see that they're all very, very different. And for Howarth, which is our B2B and technology specialist agencies, it might be talking about the role of Australian wool in terms of fashion design around the world. So they're very different in terms of the type of work that we do. In terms of our size, yes, we're number 1. And I think the most important thing to say to all of you is that agencies, I worked in the UK for a long time, And agencies in Australia and here are very, very, very competitive. So we're competitive with each other for business, we're competitive with each other for clients, and we're competitive with each other for talent. It's a very competitive industry, but with that comes all the excitement you would expect. So in terms of what we really do, I was thinking about when I was putting this presentation together, what you'd really want to know about. So I hope I'm going to hit the nail on the head. If I don't, just tell me I'm boring and we can talk about absolutely anything. I'm all for that. So in a nutshell, what we really do, regardless of whether it's internal, product launch, public affairs, government relations, or business to business, is that we help our clients address their stakeholders in the channels that they want to be talked to. So if I really look at it, there's really only 5 steps. We look at either the business or the organisational objective that the company's trying to achieve. We look at what insight do we need to unearth for them to be able to talk to the people that they need to be talking to in the right way. We need to understand their audiences and we need to know where they are. We have this expression which is, fishing where the fish are. So we need to know the people that need to be influenced by our clients where they are. The other thing we look at more and more is the reach in terms of how we get to them and how do we get to them in a cost-effective way and in a very authentic way. We look then in terms of, if we follow steps 1 through to 3, how are we going to then make people either prefer a particular brand, or in the case of social marketing, how do we get them to stop or start doing something? So we do a lot of work with Drinkwise, for example, in Victoria, or with, obesity in children. So a lot of it's around behaviour change as well. How do we, through the communications process that we're working on, get people to stop and start to do something, or to prefer a particular brand over each other, or to ultimately purchase it? And then the advocacy is around the action and your inclination to purchase. It's very interesting when talking about and I'm really nervous, guys, I don't know why, so I'm sorry about this, it's really strange. I'm just thinking I'm just ridiculously nervous, so I'm going to try and relax. The press release in our world is dead. Now, I know that's really controversial. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it when I was little, which is pretty much before you guys were born, in terms of the way things used to be and the importance of things like press releases. But I want to talk a bit about how things are changing and how you are so lucky to be entering into this particular discipline at this time, because it's really, really exciting. The amount of change in the last 3 years in PR, when I've been in it for the last 30 years, is just phenomenal. So I've got some learnings in here of things that I've seen in terms of the skills that I think graduates need, and also just some observations as well. We also undertook some research last year about what PR will look like in the next 10 years, so I thought I'd share some of that with you as well. When I look at a PR campaign or any sort of communications campaign, we look at, and boiling it down to it, yeah, thank you, a few simple questions. Basically, we look at why is the brief here? What do we want people to do as a result of the communication? What do we actually want them to do, think, feel, or talk about when we're putting a communication piece out? How do we expect the communication to work towards achieving that? Do we want them to think better? Do we want to raise awareness? Do we want it to be provocative? What do we actually want it to do? We look at who we're trying to influence. The reason I say that the press release is dead, because when I was starting out in 1986, my first job, there was lots of press release work and you kind of cross your fingers and hope that somebody would pick it up. And in those days, there was a lot of pick-up around press releases, but that's not true anymore. You speak to any journalist and they'll say they get 500 or 600 press releases a day. We want a story in about a particular topic, then we pitch it in exclusively. We have all the right ingredients around a particular story. We've got third-party advocates to talk about it. We've got images and rich content and things like that. I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. Really important to work out what we're going to be trying to convey in an authentic way. What will help people know this? For example, a lot of the work we do is not about Microsoft standing there and talking about the fact that the new Windows 8 mobile platform is going to be, the Apple killer. We want people to talk about, either developers in terms of the applications they're going to develop, or other people talking about the virtues of a particular product. So securing third-party advocates as part of a communications program is a really essential part of PR, certainly this century. We want to know what will help make people feel the way we want them to feel about a particular brand or organisation. And the other thing is we try and work out is, how long is it going to take to change people's minds? If you think of some of the social marketing campaigns that we're doing, which is around childhood obesity, or you think about drink driving, or all of those other campaigns, we're talking about a 5 or 10 year duration for them to see real behaviour change. So it's very important that you look at the time that you think you need to change a lot of views. And that's why just getting column inches or just getting your press release covered in a magazine is an output. It's not an outcome. We need to know what people are going to do when they actually read that piece of editorial. So, in the good old days, as I mentioned before, it was very much about media relations. As I explained before about Ogilvy PR, because we've got so many different facets to our consultancy, stakeholder relations, public affairs, government relations, social media, we've got editorial people, we've got people who are internal change management experts. Communications and public relations is certainly much broader than it ever used to be. And I think it's, for those of you who are interested in working in an agency, working for one that's got that multidisciplinary expertise, I think is a really good opportunity, because you tend to learn a lot more rather than being in sort of one particular organisation. It was very much press release based, as I mentioned before, and as you know, it was only money text. If I think about the rich multimedia content now that we support with all of our campaigns, in those days you used to send out a 35mm slide. That was the idea of having some audio-visual with it as well. It was very single channel, so it was the organisation or a particular brand talking to its audience through the media. Now, if you think about community engagement and online chat and forums and blogs, that real-time feedback on particular communications and people's views on brands is real-time, and that's very, very different. It was also very siloed. I caught the end of the chat from DDB earlier, but it was very unusual, even up to 5 years ago, to be sitting in a meeting where you'd have the advertising agency, the search agency, the research agency, the PR agency all together. That happens all the time now, but only 5 years ago that wasn't the case. You'd be very much briefed individually, and you'd go off and sort of run your own show and hope for the best. That's changing quite dramatically. The other thing is that it used to be very tactical, and the question around strategic communications that was asked of Mitzi before, a lot of it was about, okay, let's have a press event, have a product launch, get some bums on seats, give them the packs, off you go. Now it's a lot more strategic in terms of thinking about, is that the right way to get to the media that we need to? We're brought into the boardroom a lot more often in terms of having a much greater say in terms of any stakeholder communication, and that's also quite new. So it also makes it really, really exciting. And the other thing, it was very one way. It was an organisation or a brand just talking directly at you. So the most important thing really is that our world's evolving. Certainly from a consultancy perspective, it's not PR agency so much anymore, it's PR consultancy. So we like to think that a lot of the advice that we're giving is very much on the same level as management consultants would give as it relates to a particular reputation or a stakeholder. So with that, there's a lot more level of strategic thinking and planning, and sort of, I suppose, intellectual faculty that goes with that as well, which makes it really exciting. Most of the conversations we're having with our clients involve, the conversations around earned, paid, and owned media channels. So it's very rarely now that we have a conversation that involves social, where we're not talking about organic search as part of the campaign that we're looking at, as well as the blogger outreach, as well as all of the other things that we would normally have in our kit. Is all right so far? Yeah, not bored yet? Okay. Testing. The other is that I mentioned is about outcome. Because public relations is becoming so important, a lot of companies are investing a lot of money in it now. Bill Gates often said if he had $1 to spend on marketing, he'd spend it all on PR. The interesting thing is with the global financial crisis and with the uncertainty around business, we're finding a lot of people aren't spending their money on traditional advertising so much anymore. They're spending it more on public relations because it's seen to be a lot more cost effective, and it seems to be a lot, there's a lot sort of more authentic and good ways of measuring the success of it. So it's very outcome driven at the moment, which is great as well. A lot of it is around listening and community engagement. I don't know, I'm not familiar enough with your course to know how much is spent on the whole area of social media and monitoring and listening to communities and that sort of thing. Is that a big part of what you do? Yeah, okay. So we have 15 people out of our 120, so you see it's almost 10% that are part of our social media team that spend all their time listening and monitoring social media channels through Radian 6 and a whole heap of other software tools to see what people are saying about our particular brands. And then we respond to them accordingly in terms of identifying the influencers and then sort of putting conversation maps together for them. But certainly 5 years ago that wasn't something that we would be doing at all. So it's this 24/7 constant listening that's really pivotal in terms of us being able to give good advice back to our clients. The other thing that's become really important lately in terms of public relations and how it's evolving is the role of storytelling. As I mentioned before, we don't use press releases very much anymore, and if we do, they're a bit of a fallback. What we try and do is sell a story into the Australian Financial Review, or we want to put something on the 7:30 report, or we want to get something in Women's Weekly. We tee up all of the various components of it. So there might be the protagonist in terms of someone that wants to tell the story. There may be an antagonist. There may be a third-party endorser. We might have a whole series of research to back up a particular point of view, and then we surround it with why this particular story is topical right now. Needs to be the why now factor. So that makes it very, very different in terms of what we used to do before is, Microsoft's flogging something, do you want to come and cover it, to let's talk about the role of commercial software in the Australian economy because of X, Y and Z. The good thing about that is if you manage to be able to become really good storytellers on behalf of your clients, and if you are really good communicators, you tend to have those conversations with journalists one-on-one. So you're literally picking up the phone and selling a story into them that you know that they're going to be really interested in. And the good thing about that is, to Mitzi's point, it's not about who you know, but if journalists trust you and know that you're going to be giving them good stories, then they will take your call. So you become really accomplished at storytelling, you become really good at placing exclusive articles, and you also become really vital when it comes to journalists in their little black book. The other interesting thing is, I talked about rich content before, but we've got video production facilities now, we've got a studio, we've got editors, all of those sorts of things that we didn't even have 2 years ago. So, it's a big deal and everyone's fighting for it. The ad guys are fighting for it, the media buyers are fighting for it, everyone wants to get into the digital content space. It's really exciting. The other interesting thing is that, as I mentioned before, because the disciplines are kind of colliding in lots of ways, and because a lot of the agencies from different areas are sitting around the table trying to work out a particular client's challenge, ideas come from anywhere. Before, it used to be the advertising or the creative agency idea would have the big idea, then the other disciplines would have to follow. That's all changed now. An idea can come from anywhere, anyone in that marketing kind of mix. And most of the best, I suppose, marketeers in Australia appreciate that the best ideas come from anywhere. So if a PR idea can lead the creative, a social idea can lead everything. So it's very much an ideas, it's an ideas generation game. How long have I got? About 5 minutes?
10, 15 minutes.
Okay. So as I talked about, the world's evolving really, really quickly. Last year, we wanted to kind of get our handle on how quickly it was changing. So last year we turned 10 years in Australia. We're part of, David Ogilvy actually, he's what Mad Men's based on. So David Ogilvy was the Scottish ad guy that was actually in Madison Avenue. So we're part of Ogilvy in Mather. And we've got 180 offices all around the world. What we wanted to do is, rather than have a party froth and bubbles for our 10th anniversary, we thought it would be a really, really good idea to ask people that were working in the industry what they thought the next 10 years in public relations would be. Because we thought, as the biggest agency, we needed to be looking at the research because it's the responsible thing to do. But I also wanted to know what sort of people I'd need to hire, and what sort of work that we'd be needing to look into. So we called it the peripheral vision study, which is the idea of kind of looking not just ahead of you, but side to side, to see what sort of trends or just what people were expecting in terms of PR in the next 10 years. So what we did is we had a split of 50 agencies, as well as 50-50 agencies, some of our competitors as well, and some clients. And before we went into the research, we actually conducted 18 face-to-face qualitative interviews just to find out really what they were thinking. I don't know whether you've done a lot of research, but research is a fundamental part of a lot of the planning that we do. And a lot of PR people make the mistake of thinking, well, I want to know I think Nicole and Helena would be interested in these three things, so I'm going to ask them about their views on these three things. In actual fact, if I ask Nicole and Helena what the three things that kept them awake at night, for example, they're probably something completely different. So rather than having a predisposition to what we thought they wanted to know, we thought we'd go out and find out what they really wanted to know. So that's why we did the qual research first, and then the qual research provided the framework for the quant research. So it was a lot more unexpected than I think that we expected. So I'm just going to give you a few highlights on this. There's a whole report on this available if you guys are interested. But you'll see here, we did the research, it was 300 people, as I mentioned, across NGOs, government, private sector, consultancy and some students. Of those 300 people, they had accumulated 3,700 years of experience in PR, and we believe it to be the most, I would say, extensive research into public relations in Australia. So what did we find? It's really interesting, actually. We found that 76% of us believe that in the future we won't be referring to ourselves as PR people, but we will be referring to ourselves as communications people. Take it or leave it, really, but that was quite interesting in terms of what people's views were. I think a lot of that's got to do with the fact that the public relations industry has been really bad at PRing itself in terms of what it really does. You hear those terms, spin doctors and, bullshit artists and all of that sort of thing. So I think that's more to do with the fact that it hasn't been given such a good rap. The other interesting thing is that 60% of people believe that PR and advertising would form more of a hybrid in terms of having one agency. So rather than having discipline specialists, that actually be organisations where they merged. And there are some agencies now that already do that. And there are some like us that sort of dabble around the edges of some of it, but we have the integrity of the public relations at the core. And the other interesting thing is that 45% of people, and I'll talk a bit more about this really briefly, believe that agencies and PR people will be around content creators and also around storytelling, which is really, really interesting. So that was quite interesting. The other couple of things that I thought you might be interested in is the role of entertainment in terms of socialising information. So more than 2/3 of us thought that PR would help socialise organisations, and by that they mean using social channels and our own individual networks to get messages out, as opposed to using more traditional media. The other interesting thing was that the 63% believe that educating and changing people's view will also be dependent on our ability to entertain them, and I think that you can see that with the whole sort of overload of multimedia and video. And if you can't communicate it in 140 characters or less or a video, then is it really worth saying? The other interesting thing about the future of practitioners is, as I mentioned, is the storytellers of tomorrow. Is that they really believe, or we all really believe, that you need to be translating really good stories to the audiences in a way that they understand and that they believe. And they also believe that strategic thinking, as I mentioned before, in terms of that ability to be consulting at the highest levels in boards and with your clients, more than just about a particular public relations challenge. You need to have a really broad understanding of what's going on in the political and the business environment. there's one piece of advice I could give you. Oh, there's probably lots of advice I could give you in terms of mistakes that I made. If you're not listening to ABC radio every morning or reading the newspapers, I don't know how you digest them, then you're in the wrong industry. You need to know what's going on in current affairs. And I bet you bottom dollar, the minute you go into an interview, if it's a consultancy or anyone in-house, they will ask you about current affairs. And if they don't, shame on them. So you really, really need to understand and have an appreciation for current affairs and what's driving the news agenda. Otherwise, how can you possibly, you work in the media, you need to understand what's going on. So I would urge you to do that. The other interesting thing really is terms of measurement. I know Mitzi talked a bit before about the value of earned media. We don't put a value on earned media at Ogilvy. In fact, advertising value equivalents we banned last year. We try and put a whole series of other metrics around it. And you can see from this particular research here how people influence our ability to solve a business outcome is based on our ability to change a person's behaviour or influence what they're thinking. So you can see I've got AVE, RIP, which is rest in peace. I did lots of judging actually yesterday for the B&T Awards for the Best PR campaign. Really interesting. A lot of the really best PR campaigns came from the advertising agencies, not the PR agencies, which is really interesting as well, just to show that, it's any idea can come from anywhere. So there's just a couple of things I thought I'd just... okay, I'm just getting into my groove now. Joking. There's just three things I thought in terms of what this all means. I think that... for me, really, is the fact that it's discipline agnostic now in terms of the role of good ideas and workable creative ideas created from deep insights is vital. So, no matter where you are, ideas grounded in insight are going to be a fundamental part of your success. And that's easier said than done, but, those insights will come from research and a voracious appetite to understand what's going on and to be trawling the internet and to be, becoming a member of particular blogs and all of that, reading blogs and things like that so you know what's going on. There is a blur between the other marketing disciplines, but there's also a massive opportunity for public relations because we've always been seen to be the, the arbiter and the creator of those really, really good stories. So we're in a really, really good place. I won't talk about the role of social media terribly much, other than to say that in Australia, out of any other developed country, we are the most voracious users of social media. So there's not one campaign that we do now that hasn't got a social component. And in fact, what is really scary is a lot of the decision makers and marketing directors that come to us are, even older than me and don't even really understand what this means. What's going to happen is in 10 years' time, those guys will retire and it's only be all about social media and integration and as I said before, fishing where the fish are. So social and digital and your expertise in this I cannot overstate. The other thing as well in terms of different sets of skills, if I was thinking about what if I had to look for people. We take a lot of interns every year. We probably take about 10 and then we hire probably about 4. What we do, and if I think about now, what would I look at if I had to put a job ad together? It would be writer, channel planner, content creator, channel surfer, community understander, both online and offline, have a really broad understanding of public affairs, understand the importance of stakeholder groups, video producer, editor, photographer. Some tech skills would be great, and if you can develop a couple of apps, then that would be fantastic. So I think you see that, it's a very exciting career. I've loved it. I've done it for 30 years. I've absolutely loved it, and I've loved the fact that I've been able to see it change. But like all people, me included, at 47, I need to embrace a lot of these new changes and the technical capabilities and requirements and understanding, and really, really push myself out of what I would consider to be quite safe boundaries in terms of the way that we've done public relations before. So if you can be all of those things, drop me an email and you can come join us. And that was it. Thank you.
So you talked about stopping and starting behaviours, and I was wondering if you had any tips on how to do this in social media if your target market isn't actually connected to the brand through Facebook or Twitter or whatnot.
Yep. I think a lot of mistakes that brands make is that they create a Facebook page, they've got a Twitter handle, and they think that's a social media strategy. And the fact is those owned assets are only part of, they're probably 10% of the overall equation. What we would say is to have authentic conversations with people who really matter to your brand. So, for example, we are trying. It's a boring example, but it's a good one. We were working with Telstra, and they're trying to get to CIOs that spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on technology and telecom services. We've been trying the Fin review. We've been trying all the other stuff that we need to do. What we haven't been doing effectively is we haven't been engaging with the CIOs online, but in a way that they want to be engaged with. So that's by understanding the things that keep them awake at night, the themes, how we can add value to the conversations, etc., 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 so that we have a valued and authentic conversation around, so in that network, as opposed to actually asking them to actively support the brand in a very overt way, because they wouldn't do that. So I think another example of that would be if there's, of all the people that are online that may be engaging your brand through a process of online identification, influencer audit, you'd work out the 30 that you needed to influence and forget about the 30,000 and work on a program of influencing them, because they've got the greatest influence, either through the number of followers or the gravitas that they have, and work out a program just for them, as opposed to trying to get everybody. Did that answer it? Okay.